Hello everyone, I'm happy to finally be posting an art related video again on my channel. This one is just going to be on adoptables, so if you're interested in seeing how I made these Valentine's adoptables, just want to hear a bit more about my process or just hear some of my thoughts about selling adoptables and all, then keep watching. So I started working on these Valentine's Day adoptables like around 2 or 3 weeks ago, and while only one of them really ended up being Valentine's themed, I was happy I got these done in time before the 14th. So in the background here, I'm just going to show you the sped up footage of my process from beginning to end, and I always start in the beginning by sketching on paper. So generally what I do is I jot down some themes, ideas, or motifs that interest me over a few days. However, this time I didn't do that, but I had a lot of ideas in my head already, such as making a snake themed adopt due to, it's this year of the snake this year. So yeah, I just went ahead and sketched it all out. This part of the sketching is generally done very lazily. It's not really clean or anything, it's just to get the ideas down. I usually have 3 models that are similarly lazily drawn. Sometimes I do 4 if I realize I have a lot of ideas, but this is just a preliminary sketch, so it's not really like to get solid designs, but rather get down individual elements that I think will be the central core of the design. For example, in the first one, it's the boa and the snake, and in the third one, it's the big heart pigtails. You'll see here I'm actually sketching 3 designs, but I only ended up posting 2. The reason for that is that the one in the middle I was just not very confident with. A thing about me when it comes to adoptables is that I do not do them on a base, and it takes a lot of time to make each, and as my time is quite limited, I'm not willing to put out an adoptable I don't feel very strongly towards. Considering I charge pretty high for adoptables, I'm going to talk more about pricing later if you're interested. I just don't want to put in a lot of effort and time into a design I don't feel personally convinced with, and I wouldn't feel comfortable selling for a high price either. Because if I'm putting like 5 hours into these and putting a lot of effort into the details and then putting it up for a price that's really high and it doesn't sell, then it's a big waste of time for me. And if I'm not confident that it will sell, then what's the point of even rendering it properly, right? So here are the preliminary sketches. As you can see, they're a bit messy. I let these ones sit for a few days, first because I got busy and also because I was not convinced with all of them, so I just waited out, let it simmer, see what I can do later. Of course, if I feel convinced and confident with them all immediately, I usually just go straight to sketching on my computer next. But I didn't this time, so for round 2, I actually ended up ditching the middle design and incorporating a few of its ideas I had for it with the snake design, which I also made a lot of changes for because I didn't like the direction it was going in my first sketch. Originally, I was going for this very fancy elegance look, but I wanted it to look a bit more casual because having something very fancy and something that's very casual next to each other, I feel doesn't fit. Although people generally buy adoptables individually, I like to make sure that the adoptables have some kind of connection or look okay, look pretty good next to each other, since I usually post them together. So I talked a lot about the snake one, but the third one is evidently heart and Valentine's Day themed. I mentioned recently on Blue Sky that I'm really into light chrome, that bubbly chrome kind of wavy rounded silver look. Not so much the edgy sharp tribal chrome we've seen trending in the past few years, but I guess the natural evolution of it that looks a bit more puffy or like a helium balloon. So I wanted to incorporate details from this on both, especially on the hearts themed one because it didn't have anything else notable about it at that time. Here are the final paper sketches, and I'll be moving to digital now. While I sketch these out, I just want to talk about what I tend to like doing in terms of adoptable designs. The first one, which I mentioned already, is have 1 or 2 standout elements like the snake or the hare, just to have something interesting going on at a minimum for each. Even if they're not physically big like the snake, it just needs to be something that makes it different from the other, and maybe that can appeal to someone who specifically likes that one thing. The second thing is detail, so the more detailed an adoptable is, in my experience, the better it sells. From what I see, people like intricate details as it can make an outfit that is relatively simple more interesting. Details don't really need to be in the form of accessories, it can also come in the form of patterns, textures, props, or little pets, stuff like that. However, I do think it's important to have balance. I'm not someone who's personally fond of an overload of details, especially if they don't pertain to the theme I have in mind. When I look at character designs from certain games, for example, that are overloaded with textures, colors, and details, I actually really hate it. So for me, although I really like detailed designs, I think a sense of cohesiveness is really important to me. Similarly, I also don't like making designs where the clothes don't look functional in one way or the other. I like thinking about how the clothes layer on top of each other, how they are attached to other pieces, if anything, and more. This doesn't mean it has to be like entirely realistic. As you can see on the third adoptable, there's like floating rings, right? But it's more like if a character is going to be designed to have horns and I want them to have a hat, I'm gonna try my best to design something so that the horns don't magically poke out of the hat if they're wearing one. Maybe the hat will be further back, or maybe there will be multiple openings in the hat, something like this. The third thing is color schemes, and generally mines always include pink since it's my favorite. I feel if an adoptable doesn't have pink, I'm less interested in it, and I will then assume that buyers will also be less interested in it. Although I know that makes no sense, but I generally don't feel confident in adoptables that don't at least have a pink accent, just because I personally lose interest in the design. The last point is I try to give the individuals themselves something interesting that's not related to the outfit, so that like if they weren't in the outfit they were wearing, they're not completely bland. This can be things like hairstyle, pupils, tattoos, skin markings, doll parts, things like that. An example of this here is the first girlie actually has slight scales designed in her, but I haven't drawn them yet probably. When sketching digitally, this is where I sort out the fine details of the design. After that, I move to the line art, which is not a very interesting process, honestly, but it is the part I like in drawing the most because it is kind of mindless. It's something that's important for me still because I think my lining skills are stronger than my coloring skills, and you all know, or maybe don't know, but I don't like coloring at all. So I make sure the lines are good and detailed so I don't have to put as much effort into coloring after. These are adoptables as well, so I keep my shading more to a minimum, but I still include some so I have to apply myself with the line art. By the way, I prefer thick lines, so my brush size is usually between 10 to 12 pixels. You'll see here there are some details like chains or pendants that will be added way later. I'm just saving my time when it comes to coloring and lining because these are such small details they don't really need to be lined just yet. When it comes to picking base colors, sometimes I have a hard time. If I have a favorite at this point, the color scheme can make me change my mind once the colors have been finalized. This time around, I actually didn't have much trouble picking them out, luckily, since I had like a clear vision from the start. With all my drawings, I start by just putting all the more or less flat colors down before moving into doing the eyeshadow and like shading the skin a tiny bit. This usually doesn't take too long because it's not something I do very carefully. Not pictured here because I was only filming Paint Tool Sai, but I also duplicate my line art and use Gaussian blur on GIMP, or GIMP, I don't know how you say it, which is the program I've used to prepare complete drawings once I'm done, like I crop, save multiple versions, resize, etc. And I know I don't need to use that anymore, but I've just always used GIMP for this since I'm like 12, so I've just never broken out of that habit. Like it does what it needs to do pretty well. I also use it for my YouTube thumbnails. So after that, another important part of my process is recoloring the line art, which takes longer than I expect every time, so you'll just see me doing that here. I apologize, I don't really have much more to say here because I don't really do anything special. It's kind of just more like a methodical process at this point. So instead, let me just talk about the final designs. The first one in particular has a pantsuit on, which I think is kind of new for me. I do pants rarely, maybe I'll put some up here, but I don't think I've ever done a pantsuit. I really like the combo of it with the sunglasses and the corset and the snake. I think it looks very casual, but still has that kind of elegant feel that I had in my very first draft. She has long hair because I feel if an adoptable has long hair, it is always a big draw when it comes to people buying them, which is actually why I went for long hair here instead of an updo. Initially, she also had a halo, but I felt there was a bit too much going on. I also contemplated adding angel wings, but there was just too much weight at the torso area due to the snake and the boa, so instead she has ankle wings. The second adoptable is more overloaded in accessories, which is intentional, specifically when it comes to the chrome ones added to her hair clips. Something I added in only much later, but I hadn't planned, was the diamond design on her bolero. I think when I was putting down the flat colors, it looked too plain before, and I think this was a good way of adding a pattern that matched. Here, it's specifically meant to match with her fishnets without being fishnets themselves, due to the diamond shape. Her halo also looked different at first, but it didn't fit with the pigtails, so I went with these two duo halos instead. As I finish the line art color, I actually go ahead and merge everything and just start painting on top of it to make everything look neater. This is where I fix any lines that weren't as nice as I'd wanted. I clean up some areas, add a bit more shading, especially in areas like the hair. It's a very subtle difference, but I always spend like an hour or so going in and doing this because it just gives my drawings the cleaner finish I prefer, especially when it comes to an adoptable where it might be used as a reference for like other artists drawing it if they want to commission it. Then I think all the details need to be as clear as possible. While I do that, let me talk about pricing for a bit. So these both ended up being priced for 190 USD each. Both are already sold as I'm recording, and I'm lucky in the sense that generally all my adoptables sell, and although sometimes I do have to lower my prices, generally I get the price I set for them. My mindset when it comes to pricing is that the adoptable can't just be slightly above the price of what a chibi commission would be. My chibis start at 90 USD, and with this amount of detail can easily go up to like 120 or something. So if I'm selling the design too, I don't want to sell it for something like just 130 USD because then the design is only selling for $10. If that were the case, like I would not do adoptables, I would just do commissions and call it a day. There's other factors I consider like time, scarcity, etc. I don't do adoptables very often, maybe only like 3 times a year or something, so they're not something you can get from me too frequently. And I also have a decent following, so I feel like I'm able to price that much based on all these factors. However, the fact that I don't make adoptables often means a lot of people don't see me as an adoptable artist. They might not come to me for an adoptable. So I think you can consider these things very carefully when it comes to selling your own adoptables, because ultimately, whatever price you pick, it has to be suitable for you and all the factors you find important. All the things about your own process and all the factors that affect you in determining like what a price is fair for you. So, for example, you might ask yourself, how much do you usually charge? How much experience do you have? Do you have a lot of interest? Do you have a lot of fees to pay upon selling? For example, PayPal fees. How much is it in your currency if the exchange is not very great? How much time it took you? You know, all those things. Ultimately, I think artists can price whatever they want for their work. Like I've seen adoptables sell for near 4 digits, and as long as there is someone out there who's willing to buy an artist's hard work, I'm like, you go do that. Because I'm never gonna criticize someone for spending a shit ton of money on an artist's real work. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see what there is to criticize about that. So if you think your adoptable can sell for like 500 USD, you put that price on 500 USD and you see how it goes. No problem. For me though, something between 180 and 200 is usually where I'm at. I think also with how fucked up social media is these days, I'm more and more hesitant regarding whether adoptables will sell simply because the reach is no longer what it used to be. Like, even if people are interested, they may not see your post no matter how hard you try, especially on things like Twitter. I think this is something a lot of artists are worried about right now, not just for adoptables, but like for everything they post. So I think it's worth diversifying where you post. However, yeah, that's still like in my mind whenever I start designing adoptables. I'm just like, am I going to be wasting my time because like no one's gonna see this? And yeah, so you might also want to consider that. Although I'm sure you're already considering that, unfortunately, a lot of us are. Moving back to drawing now, the final step for me is adding all the shinies as well as the details I didn't include earlier, such as the heart chains and the pendants. After that, it's a question of quick color correction, placing my signature, swatches, watermarks, and more. I personally hate doing this part because I'm lazy, but it has to be done. I think this about wraps up the Valentine's adoptables. Here's how they turned out. Let me know what you think about them. But yeah, I hope that you found this process interesting. And if you have any questions regarding making or selling adoptables, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments. I'm more than happy to reply to them, etc. I didn't really know what people wanted to hear, so I just talked about what I thought might be interesting. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!